Welcome to Lola and the Poets, a podcast on the magical reel. Hello everyone and welcome to the 7th episode of Lola and the Poets, this one on liminality and sensory experiences with Joshua Sternlicht, a filmmaker and educator, based in Lisbon, Portugal. My name is Milana and I shall be your host, coming to you from the leafy groves of Novi Sad, Serbia.
Hundreds of thousands of people are going to listen to him over the radio, and unless he says something that's sensational, it's just no good.
Hello to everyone listening to Lola and the Poets. This one is with Joshua Sternlicht, and he is a filmmaker, an educator, and an organizer of events of a very special kind. And those are sensory experience events in Portugal. So hello, Joshua.
Hello, Milana.
Hello.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It's really a pleasure to have you. We don't know each other, which is not the case with all the guests I had up to now on the podcast. So for me and for people listening, it would be a very good idea to actually start with what you're doing now, because what we're going to talk about is going to have a great deal to do with the idea of liminality, which you're very interested in. And that is possibly the reason you're on the podcast as well. Let's start with what the idea of liminality and the idea of sensory experiences has with the events that you're holding. How did that all come about? How did you start?
So, Liminal Sessions was born actually just over a year ago, July 2020 in Portugal, when I first moved here, actually after 4 years in Berlin, where I was making films. And I knew Portugal would be a future home, and I wanted to do something different, which is really involve film and storytelling, which is my entire background since I was young, but bring it into nature and involve the senses. So it started out as this loose idea that I want to host experiences that go deep into the senses and immersed in nature with storytelling. So that was the beginning idea. And actually, I have a mentor, Gustavo, here in Lisbon. And we were just talking one day, and I mentioned that I used to teach film, and I had a unit called Film and the Five Senses. And just talking about this idea of sensory experience, he said, what about food? What about food and the five senses? And because food is so universal, and we can all connect to food pretty well.
Yeah.
and so it started really with this food in the five senses, and which we're still developing and changing. That's our premiere event, Food in the Five Senses, which is a 5-hour multisensory journey. So back to Liminal Sessions. This is just one of our experiences we're developing. I hope that answered part of it. Maybe we could go more.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm very interested in is the point of time when you start to think about the experiences being transferred into nature and storytelling being transferred into the palpable. because with filmmaking, although it is a palpable medium in the sense that it is made on something that is palpable in itself, it's very ephemeral, and it has to do with the imaginal realm. And with food, it's nourishment. So it's not only an enjoyment, it is a necessity. For me, I always thought of culture as food as well, as nourishment. So to put these two things together in the year of our Lord 2020 seems to me an idea that is somehow completely natural to do. I guess that is somehow a motivation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you actually touch on the next point, which is I wanted to really deliver a holistic experience. And when I say that, it's about experiencing food, but in the right environment and already brought to a point where you're open to explore the liminal space. And that's a big part of all of our experiences is this exploration of liminality, and that we want our guests to understand, like, that's what we're trying to do. It's not a retreat. It's an experience that we want engagement, and that's about, this entire environment that we bring people to. And in the sense, it is a journey. It started out being just this 5-hour event, and now it's grown into a 2-night full weekend, Friday to Sunday experience. And the main event is this Saturday afternoon, evening. Yeah, and so I think all the elements that we've brought into it, and when I say elements, it's dealing with sounds, with smells, with things to touch and feel and see. All of these are really thought of in the same way of a film, that every detail in every shot, in every sound is considered. We're trying to go that direction, I would say, and more.
Yeah,
And so
it's more the way I saw it when I looked at what you're doing is that it's very well framed. It has a really good frame to it, so I could understand what it is immediately. So it was clear to me it was done by somebody with an eye for framing. Also, I found that transfer from being in an imaginal space into being a space where you experience touch extremely important, because it has to do with touch and taste, two of the senses that are being quite starved in an era where we're transferred online. Because we have the audios and the visuals. Of course, smell as well is also starved, let's say. But the audio visual took a primacy over the other senses that are actually evolutionary, quite older. I found that quite interesting. And to frame the experience of what you're doing into, let's go back and actually experience what it is, that how we taste and how we smell and how we touch, is almost like a re-education. Am I going the wrong way with that, or is it something that has crossed your mind?
No, that's definitely an easy way to look at it, because we are in many ways going back to childhood in the sense of when you use this idea of the imaginary. But when we think of nature, depending on where people have grown up or where they spent their childhood, but there is something that's taking them home, and we really carefully think about our venue, which is currently this 40-hectare quinta or guest house farm, 20 minutes north of Lisbon, and they produce 12 varieties of wines. There's vineyards, and there's a wolf reserve next to it. So it's this incredible. It's really like an incredible setting. We think about all the details here.
If I were to go, I would see it as almost like a re-educational experience in terms of remembrance, but also in terms of understanding the importance of certain things that are forgotten.
Absolutely.
As important.
Yeah. It's much of it is really just a lot of mindful tuning in, and these are things that we all have from childhood, and that we're giving and is really inviting an opportunity to bring us back to these moments. I think nature is a catalyst for it. So that the smells, the sounds, the touch brings us there.
It's absolutely true. But even when I think about, for instance, tastes of my childhood, and things I would get really excited about, and how that instantly brings me into a state of joy without really too much effort.
Yes.
It's just
This is beautiful to actually, because we have the chance to even to see this expression on or reaction, even particularly from smells, because smells go quite deep. They say up until the age of 10, smell is actually primary, even over sight. But around 10, more or less, sight takes over, but smell really goes deep into to really taste. So smells evoke deep memory, feeling, and yeah, it brings. I mean, it's like an instant transfer, like time travel. It can be.
yeah, I can definitely see it being as such. Can you give a little demonstration of, something that you do in order to evoke it?
Yeah. So the 5 hour, when I say 5 hour, it's 1 hour dedicated to each sense. So 3 of those, we call them moments, and it begins with a game or an exercise or something like live theater, improv theater, and each of those would end with a tasting and a bit of a reflection after that about how the senses overlapped in that particular case. So we have 3 of these moments are blindfolded, and that is really to go inner and to go inside and to have less distractions visually. But then we have two moments that are really using sight. So, for example, just to give you an idea of smell, is that we play a bit of a game with smell jars and being blindfolded, and as you're walking by, and catching some smells and trying to use smells that are universal enough. There are certain smells that, like rosemary, and that almost.
Oh yeah, I love rosemary. Yeah, it's beautiful.
And lavender, that almost everyone in one way or another had contact with the smell, and it's going to maybe bring them to a memory. So we're going through a variety of smells, and we're kind of putting them out there, seeing a response, doing even like reviews, and just experimenting with smell and how it's hitting us, and then using actually some of these smells that were just experienced in the tasting, and seeing how people can identify smells within the food itself that they just had tasted. So it's kind of each step of the way a bit of a game and exercise into smell, and seeing, so identifying and then seeing how it fits within the food that was cooked. That smell is the one that is tricky, certainly for some people, and we see a great range of sensitivities to different types of smells. Yeah, and we're using a lot of herbs.
You mean there's a greater selectivity when it comes to what we prefer to smell rather than what we prefer to taste?
Yes. I mean, smells easier to, in some sense, because we just, take a whiff and we're not necessarily tasting it. But yeah, I think the sensitivity factor, and that some smells that we really like, we are going to, of course, try to get to bring us back to that smell. And that smell, of course, is connected probably to a taste, probably to a dish, in one way, often, not always, but often.
Yeah. I mean, if you're doing an experience with food, it would be definitely connected with food, but also because it's in nature, then you have all these other smells really that can come in and maybe even overpower the smell of food. So I guess that you need to also contain things in a certain way so people get.
Yes, so it didn't mention it. So we really isolate the smells, and they're actually in small smell jars. And we pass these around. Yeah, so there, of course, there are a lot of smells going on out there. But for this exercise, we're really going through these. We have 5 smell jars that are sealed, and we're really kind of careful about how can we maximize that particular smell.
Well, I want to kind of roll back a little bit into the philosophical part of what you do. I feel it's a really important thing. First of all, for people listening that would be naturally drawn to such a discussion, but also to get into the background of the experience itself, but also your own background. What is your idea of liminality?
Mm-hmm. Well, applied to the senses, because that's the context here. It's being at a threshold in a sense, and being open to either receiving. It's really about being open to new information, being in this kind of space in between, and being able to open oneself up, let go, take in the information, really, because the senses are delivering so much there, but it may happen at a subliminal, not to confuse the definitions here of liminal, subliminal, but sometimes, smell is passing through us and we don't even know why we're feeling a particular way, perhaps not aware of the smell. But if we can inspire people to just explore and be open and pay attention to this liminal space, and it's really about maybe there will be a completely new smell or taste that somebody experiences even during this event, or it will remind them of something associated. So it's really it's like an exercise. It's, in a sense, it's a meditative concept, but applied to a 5-course tasting kind of moment situation.
Yeah, when I think of liminality, it's a place in between specific contexts and perceptions of things that we're used to, a space where we are open to information, to new information, because it is a space in between. So it can be applied to many things in terms of what you do. It is a threshold where you're open to receiving perhaps an old taste or an old familiar smell, but with a new type of information. Because I'm also looking at the psychological elements in what you're doing there, not just the joy, which in itself, especially at the times, is almost, it's enough, really. But I do feel that psychologically there can be quite a lot of memories that bubble up that, in a way, help us set up our storylines and remember who we are in a way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yeah. So yeah. So yeah, you go ahead. Sorry. Yeah. That was my little riff on what you're doing. But yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, it's when we think about liminality, and it is totally about opening up. If we're not open, then we may not receive, and that this new information, and to really to be able to access it across different senses, even, and using the senses really as like the kind of a cone, like to enter a funnel to see what's coming out. So these could be completely new memories even being formed, but we've also, I think more so, found that people will respond to smell, and it will bring a very deep emotion or memory. And this is really, really interesting, because it's instant that you can like see these feelings coming out, and that's quite powerful to arouse that simply by smell.
Yeah.
For example.
Yeah. It's a powerful medium, I guess. And I think with the senses, they're just mediums, aren't they? They're the way that we get information about the world. In a way, we could just eat without a sense of smell and taste. Really, it's not necessary to taste food or smell it in order to eat it and get some sort of sustenance from it. Perhaps not nourishment, but But with the sense of taste and smell, we get a great deal of information about what we are eating. And that is, if that's something that's good for us. But it's also, because I think of it as education and retraining, it's also going back to understanding of just how much we can get information-wise from senses that perhaps taken a little bit of a backseat to the audiovisual, because the audiovisual are the two senses that became possibly, the way that we all communicate, because touch is now almost a liminal experience in itself rather than a sense. So it's very interesting, because I find it when you talk about it, I am now being in your sessions, reminding myself of just how much information I can get from these two senses and what they mean to me.
Yeah, that last part, what they mean to you, is also interesting, because it is there is this sort of intuitive collection also of information, and how that's the sustenance part of it as well. So that's interesting. Yeah.
And now I wanted to ask you about storytelling as well, because of the aspect of the storytelling and what you do. But you are a storyteller. I mean, that's how you came into this gig and started doing it. Can you tell us a little bit about how you became a storyteller? I guess it's childhood, because that's always where it starts. But
Yeah.
So where are you from? Where are you from?
Yeah.
Where did you grow up? And
Okay.
when did you first realize that you loved to tell stories?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm from upstate New York. The capital of New York State is Albany, and I grew up about 20 minutes away because my father was a mechanical engineer for General Electric, and and then he was developing fuel cells and other technologies. But my father's Polish, mother Russian, so first generation American. I lived and studied and worked in New York City for 16 years, and film came to me really as a child going into a cinema, and I'll refer to E.T. Extraterrestrial because it was one of my earliest memories about this idea of being transported to another world in a very short amount of time and going into this, audiovisual place, and through through this alien in a closet, just opening up your entire world. And I really just loved stories and just going into the cinema and being transported and thinking about those films for days, weeks, years later. So I was like, I wanted to just somehow be a part of that in one way or the other.
Yeah, E.T. is a very heart medicine film. I mean, it is a very heart-opening film, so I can definitely see that. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, I was just wanting to comment on that it's an interesting first cinema experience, E.T.
Yeah. So he definitely did tap into the feelings and emotions. So I knew I wanted to be part of the film, and I was thinking, okay, what suits me, fits, where do I fit the best? So initially it was really about conveying the visual information. So cinematography I went to school. I studied at Columbia University with liberal arts, really the first 2 years, and film as a bachelor's, which was more theory, history, criticism about film. We really didn't touch like Columbia's program, that you don't really, in undergrad, you don't really touch even cameras until the very last semester. So I was more learning through documentary and shooting cinematography and doing like short format projects for clients. And I worked also as an editor for a while, for advertising for a bit even, and music videos. And then came to really longer format storytelling around 2007. I got an opportunity to shoot Poetry Africa, to document this festival where there were like 20 invited musicians and poets. And I formed a pretty close connection to a really quirky South African musician poet named Sid Kitchen, and during the festival, and decided then to make a documentary film about he was 57 years old.
That's a really cool name. I mean, apart from anything else.
Yeah. And the film is called Fool in a Bubble. Fool in a Bubble.
Is it available anywhere? Can people?
It is. Yeah. Yes, it is. They can contact me, or it can be found, not easily, but
Okay.
uh,
Okay. I might contact you.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
So that was 3 years on and off, actually, between South Africa and New York, and it was a real pleasure to work on this film and also uncover what is South Africa and what is this Rainbow Nation concept. As a New Yorker, I'd always heard about it, but it's the other edge of the world, and to understand what's going on in this, really interesting mixed place. And I spent most of my time there in Durban, which is Indian, predominantly
Oh,
with, aside from African, you have a lot of,
okay.
because Gandhi actually lived in Durban. Anyhow,
Oh, yes, of course.
to
That's when he practiced law. Is that correct?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So
Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so I was drawn, I started in documentary, and then I was teaching. I got great opportunities actually to teach film, both production and analysis, theory, language of film to high school
Hmm.
students at international schools, because it's part of, some schools have what's called IB, International Baccalaureate. And
Right.
I was lucky enough. I started teaching initially in New York, got a master's in art education, and then lucky enough to teach in Manila, Philippines for 3 years, and Shanghai, China for 2 years. And then I decided I want to go back into filmmaking, storytelling, really my passion, but move from documentary, nonfiction into fiction, still keeping the real stories, real people, real ideas alive, and really just fictionalizing.
I wanted to
Um,
ask you before you go into that. I wanted to ask you about the experiences living in these different parts of the world.
okay.
But yeah, it's very interesting. I was born in Yugoslavia, but I spent my childhood in Tehran, Iran.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, and then back to Yugoslavia, and then London, and so the idea of being in different spaces, especially when I was very young, but also later on, I found that those different contexts helped me understand this almost neutral space, if we talk about liminality, in between different civilizations. So not only understanding what connects different parts of the world and the humanity that connects us all, but also understanding the different contexts of cultures. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, because they're very different cultures. You've born in New York, and then by the way, I went to an international school in Tehran. I'm that old. That's when I was an I was an
What's
American
that?
intern.
What, that doesn't mean old, because international schools are
No, no, no.
you
But
know.
it was an American. Yeah,
Oh,
I need to.
oh,
Yeah, I needed to preface that. Yeah, so it was an American
oh.
international
There's
school.
the
Yeah, it
time of
was.
the Shah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay, okay.
Um, so so in international schools are specific kinds of environments, because I was in one, but also the context of living in a different country. So one thing is the international school and that environment, and then it's the mores of the country, and living in different spaces and places, and connecting with different kinds of cultures. So for a New Yorker that has all these different kinds of cultures in a very, very small space of New York, which for some reason always reminded me when I go to New York to Eastern Europe. I don't know why, but I just have like a I mean, I know there's many reasons, but it's just there's something about it, about the vibe, that I just
Hmm.
found super familiar in terms of also where I'm from. Something that really is when it's transposed into the world, when New York as such, which I love, is transposed into the world, and actually you go into different places, there must be something that surprised you immediately, or not.
Yeah, well, from early childhood, I was really exposed to European influences, mainly Polish and Russian through my parents.
Yeah,
Also Indian. So and I knew my father was really a child refugee, from the ages of 11 to 14, from Poland to India himself. So he actually spent his boyhood him and his father in India. So already I had a sense of like, okay, I'm gonna be exploring, and I really just, as soon as I was able to travel internationally, I really just took it as like, I'm not just going up to a place as a tourist, and I really am about exploring and seeing how I myself am adapted or can adapt and look at different cultures through different lenses, and really enrich my world. So it's interesting with travel, because my brother, for example, doesn't really like to travel, but I knew early on that it's going to pretty much define me, and working in international schools only like exponentially brings that out, because here you meet all these people, all these kids especially, that have already lived in 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 or more countries by the age of like 16. So the whole question of identity, and so I mean, for me, the experience of living in the Philippines for 3 years and living in China for 2 years, it's so radically different to life in New York and the West. But I really relished that, and I knew that even a part of myself like is I really gravitate towards Asian, just the way of life, the culture there, and I really feel like it was just awakened in me, and being there, and I felt a part of myself feeling very at comfort and at ease with that way of life, and almost to the extent that sometimes I'm like, imagine if I had been born here and the West was more foreign to me. So yeah, when you spend, I guess, enough time and want to understand the culture and try to really like experience it as a local, then these things can arrive. So
you went to different places, so you could see yourself functioning in different and living, not just functioning, living in different environments, and feel what environment suited you most, because it's a matter as well of how what your own frequency and the way you vibrate as an individual, with all the elements of who you are and your history, and then mix up with your personal things, how it actually functions and how it thrives or does not thrive in a particular different kind of environment. And to find that it thrives maybe better in a completely different environment than the one that you've been born in is an interesting, I guess, discovery. Because but I also find it, I mean, that's why I asked the question, is there anything that surprised you? Because I'm very interested in first impressions and first experiences in everything, in culture as well as, personal relationships. And I guess the first impression of a place could be different things. It could be a preconception and then it's gone because it's something else, or it can be an impression that people living there are so used to that they get very jaded and can't really see it or appreciate it. So I was thinking if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about what you really appreciated in South Africa, and what it is that you really appreciated in the Philippines and in China.
Shall I answer the surprise question though?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
yes, I mean, that's the most important one.
When I first got to the Philippines, I found a lot of things very strangely familiar, and there's also this, of course, American presence there for 50 years. They had 300 years of Spanish rule and 50 years of American rule. They say 300 years of the church, 50 years of Hollywood. And that there was this, everyone speaks English more or less, and that they love Americans. That was very strange. I did not expect that to be traveling really literally around the world and then find that. So that was kind of refreshing to see, like, a nice attitude where it's typically not so.
That's it. That's interesting.
About what I appreciate. South Africa. To start with that, it's an incredible mix, a melting pot of people and that melding with the environment there, which is like I think one of the most beautiful places on earth for me. Around Cape Town, I remember the most stunning cliffs meeting the ocean, and so it's very harsh. I think the landscape also speaks a little bit about the intensity of the people meeting the place there. I think it's an incredible melting pot and really symbol of Southern Africa. Musically, that's where most of my energy was taken because I absolutely love music. This was a documentary about a musician, poet, and that is incredibly rich with his own, exploring different genres from Zulu, Maskanda, different types of African music, jazz, R&B, so folk. So really like the range, bringing in a lot of different musical elements from Indian elements as well. So to just be a part of that and also to experience the place through his lens, which means a lot of his friends in the artist world, young and old. And it's nice to get that perspective through artists. So, and they're usually pretty honest about what life was like back then, now, and what's changed. And yeah, so to come in there as a third eye, and to be the one that discovered this guy Sid Kitchen, which was quite ironic that this Eastern European Jewish New Yorker like comes in and makes a film about really a local legend, but people don't know him outside of his enclave. So
isn't it also quite the case that it always happens that way? I think that it's also that the thing about not being possibly appreciated in the right kind of way. It takes a different perspective of somebody that's an outsider very often for things to be more appreciated. So in a way, they saw this man through your eyes, and your eyes in a way alchemically enhanced what was already there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely seeing him for the first time. I mean, and that will never be reproduced. Yeah, this impression is just so overpowering. And then I've always had a pretty intense curiosity. So traveling to me is also about getting to know more about the place, the culture, and then kind of uncovering, digging something out. So this, a documentary film is a great way to also observe and just watch, see what's there, and to uncover things and learn, and through as well interviews. And so it was a great experience.
Yeah. And what about China?
Yeah.
What is it? What is it? What is it that surprised you there? And what is it that you really appreciated?
So radically different to the Philippines, the China experience. To really be in a place that is so, America's got a lot of people, 350 million, but I mean over a billion, and then Shanghai was a extremely well organized city. I was there, just for 2 years, 2014 to 2016, but somehow everything worked. I would say that surprised me the most, that everything was in some kind of yin yang harmony in the sense of considering how many people there are, and that they actually manage very well, very little traffic. For example, I experienced a lot more traffic in Manila than Shanghai, where you have a lot more people. So that's just like one thing that I was just surprised that how well everything works, how relatively clean it is, and just how much in harmony these different entities are. So that, as far as surprise, and
that could be an appreciation as well of things. So many elements suddenly working well, that don't work well in other places. Yeah,
exactly. And what I appreciated is, and this is hard to find in China, but they have an incredible, of course, ancient history. And so somehow getting like little glimpses into that by being there or meeting somebody and just absorbing this sense of like incredibly deep ancestry. For example, just something like seeing an elderly person practicing qigong or tai
Oh
chi
yeah,
in the
yeah.
in the park. You get a sense that like this is different. I don't see this in Lisbon or New York.
The same thing as Russia, people playing chess on streets. That now is kind of widely known because of the Netflix series. But it's, if you've been there before, it's the same thing. It's suddenly like, oh, people have these meditative experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they're entirely different. Have you traveled? I mean, because you hail from Eastern Europe, have you traveled a lot there? Did you
So
manage to kind of go
yeah,
back to your ancestral roots and find things that also surprised you doing that?
I have. I have. Yeah, great question. So first, in 1998, I studied abroad in Prague um, at Charles University and FAMU, which is the film school. And
Mm-hmm.
I, I, I would say that was probably the most memorable time of my life. It was just a semester. I wish it was a year, but it also happens to be the time that I met my first girlfriend. It was just a very unforgettable. And so that Prague, golden Prague, really like opened the door to Eastern Europe for me, and it's incredible Gothic architecture, Baroque. And then there was a desire to get closer to Poland because, well, my father passed in 2012, and I knew I wanted to make a film inspired by his story,
Mm-hmm.
and well before. And I was planning a trip. My parents did take me to Poland when I was like 13 as like an educational trip almost. And I remember it being very depressing, and but I was quite young and I just didn't really absorb it then. But I wanted to reconnect with his childhood, and so I took a research trip to Poland in 2017, summer of 2017, and it was really about being in the town that he was born, visiting my grandfather's castle.
Oh wow,
So yeah, so, and
that's pretty
there was a
neat.
big there
That's
was a
pretty
big
neat.
surprise with this one. So
Yeah.
grandfather Hugo, and my middle name is Hugh, grew up with a family of 15 brothers and sisters, and there was this castle that I looked up, and it has quite just a history in itself. It was formerly owned by a Count Wigalowski, and this count had a wife who was a medium, and somewhere in the 18th century, there was this woman made a prediction in this castle. There's a octagonal room, and there was a séance, and all the rooms, by the way, are exactly the same except for this one room in the basement, octagonal. And she predicted that Poland would be involved in a major world war. It'd be like and a future pope would come from Poland, and these things came true.
Yeah.
I did visit this castle and the room, and it was very, very strange.
That's an amazing story. And do you recall, or did you ever get to know her name, the name of the medium?
No, I believe I don't recall. I don't recall
Yeah,
her name
yeah. I mean,
offhand,
it's
but
just that, yeah, it's just
yeah,
she was the wife of the count, but I was just wondering. And so you've been to the octagonal room as well.
you've been to the octagonal room.
Yeah, and
Uh,
so the octagonal room exists still.
it's like it's like The Shining or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was
Is
so
it?
sweet because it's owned by this castle is now owned by an entrepreneur actually in Krakow, and he let me in, and I thought, wow, just I could almost
You
shoot
reckon
the film here.
that he's really interested in the octagonal room too, or that he's just
Yes.
saying, or
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
okay.
Probably not
Uh,
as much as me.
all right, okay. You never know though, with those
Never know.
entrepreneurs. Yeah. So that's really, really interesting. And what in terms of Russia, because you said that you're Jewish, but your family comes from both Poland and from Russia. Did you manage
Yeah.
to do a little trip in Russia as well?
I haven't. I've only been to Moscow, but my grandmother is from Vitebsk, Belarus, which is
Uh-huh.
also well known because of Marc Chagall,
Yeah.
painter,
Oh,
who's
yeah.
also
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah.
But yeah, my father's 20 years older than my mother, so it was really my grandmother who has her own incredible story on her side. But yeah, I haven't dug deep into Belarus
Hmm.
as much as so I started with my father's story, and it's something that I'm gonna develop into a film. Really, it's in the process. The script is being written, and so. I consider that in itself kind of my life's work to make a feature film inspired by his and his father's story. But equally, my grandmother's story is quite impressive, and she's actually still alive, 96 years old.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. She's from that generation. They're just amazing.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
She hails from Belarus.
yes.
I went to I visited Russia, or rather the Soviet Union, when it was still the Soviet Union, in early 80s in
Oh wow.
Moscow. And yeah, and my uncle used to work for a company there for a long time. So it was very the visit was great because it had elements of tourism, of course, but it was also I've got to see through being with somebody that lives there different things that I probably wouldn't have seen in any other way. And I was really a kid then, but I remember it really well,
Hmm.
because it was very different. Although Yugoslavia at the time was socialist, it was not in the Eastern Bloc, so it's a very different experience going into a country of that was part of the Eastern Bloc, especially Russia. And we went by train because my mother didn't
Oh wow.
yeah, didn't want to fly. So we went everywhere by train. We went to Iran by train. It
That's
was it's
incredible.
like it's just a train-filled childhood, which is amazing from this point of view. I mean, when I was a kid, I there were times I didn't appreciate it as much, but now I'm actually really happy that I was a train person. So yeah, it's a different space, and I think there's so many stories that come from that part of the world. There's so many elements that happened during the 20th century, especially the Second World War, and especially the atrocities during the Second World War, and the horrors that happened. And then my father was a partisan in the Second World War, and he was very young, kind of thrown into battle.
Hmm.
So I know, and I've spoken to a lot of the generation that had a lot of family that got erased from this earth in the time. So, and I come from the Balkans as well, the repeat of certain things in the 90s. So there's a lot of elements in places where that went through horrible things. There's a lot of stories that had to do with those particular extremes of life. But then I found throughout time, there's so many stories that flow at the same time with this big story, with this
Yeah.
main story that happened. There's so many elements that are so nuanced and so interesting to explore at the same time when these huge things were happening. I think that's really interesting that the focus of, the documentary is the ancestry, but as well these very peculiar and interesting things that you are uncovering at the same time. Like
Yeah.
like the octagonal room.
Yeah, in so many ways, truth is stranger than fiction. I mean,
Sure,
my
yeah.
grandfather was also sent to the army, and he escaped, and he hid diamonds inside of hard-boiled eggs,
Oh, yeah.
and one of them actually they used them for barter to hitchhike and such and favors. One of them though made it all the way through this entire journey over 3 years through India and made it onto my mother's wedding ring. These kinds
Wow.
of things are like, great details for cinema.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so
Yeah.
so it's also and regional storytelling. I mean, and picking up little details from different cultures. This is a film actually that will travel from Poland to Siberia and Turkey and Palestine and eventually through Iraq and down to India. I'm not sure the film will have all of those places, but there will be definitely details and nuances and cultural elements from these areas. And yeah, I think it's like this patchwork and trying to put them together, the big story, and in this case, Eurasia, this bridge.
And the storytelling, the thread that goes through it really is a family thread. So it's very, it's not in any way random. It's extremely anchored in somebody's reality and life, which then brings us back to the liminal spaces, the way that we can experience things, at the same time open us to different cultures, but also keep something that we are in all these other cultures. I was talking to another guest that also had a very international experience, and we're talking about the experiences that when you lived in different places, or when your life, as the lives of our families, took them to different places. It's so important at the same time to understand not only and adapt and be in the culture and respect its mores, but also to understand where you are within all that, that thread that runs through, and that actually is your life. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I think it's a really nice way to think about it. Is you're almost accumulating the places that you go if you're really open enough to take to receive, and it really is about letting go, being even vulnerable to some extent, being comfortable to let go. And back to our experience, it's that's the first thing we do, is actually everyone gets together, we talk about the liminal space, and then blindfolding, and then actually walked through nature with smells and sounds. But there is this real letting go right away. That who are these people that I just met, that they're taking me to through the forest, blindfolded. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's when we're put into these zones where we have the curiosity, the openness. So through travel, it's a great way to keep a part of yourself and building on, and you're kind of picking something up, whatever it may be, from that culture that gels with you, that you connect with. And
it's coloring your thread. I view it as almost like it gives you a certain kind of coloring, doesn't it? You go through one place and you get this color, and then you go through a different place and you get a different kind of hue and a vibe, and then there's yellows and oranges and and greens and things like that, and then you have the thread, and then you build your own story through all these different elements and experiences. And I think that in the sense of what you're doing now, but also the background we talked about, is that there is this great importance of things also being very palpable. And I kind of want to start wrapping up our conversation on this note of how important it is to also get back to understanding how the materialization of things that we both are in our artistic way and in our everyday lives is extremely important, because so much of our lives is now in the air, in the virtual space rather than in the physical. So I wanted to ask you a little bit before we wrap up, and that is, there is a great deal of spiritual element in what you do. Is there anything in particular in your life that was because of this podcast being on the magical reel, that was a turning point in your perception of the way life works on Earth, in terms of perception?
So I can't say there was just one thing, but I did have, like, let's say a major injury that was kind of traumatic. That was a bit of but I could say maybe it was a series of almost a sense of, and I think not everyone, but that finds some spiritual yearning or thirst or desire for connection. So for me, it was a series of periods, and maybe we could call that a midlife crisis. But I think the connection to food, the connection to earth, and really taking stock, and all of our food as well is plant-based. And it's quite important that we're, despite the fact that I'm personally like a pescatarian, but we're plant-based. There is elements of gratitude, and we really want to, like, the holistic part of this is to not just notice things in ourselves, but to think about where, how are we being nourished, and where is this coming from, and so that builds into liminal sessions, and any chance to remind people to give back, and we do have these very nice moments, and I think it's also quite complementary with exploring this liminal space and being receptive, and also thinking a bit about, where is it coming from, and how can we take something, and that actually comes back to the storytelling element, because we have a main star of each liminal session dependent on the season. And that main star is an ingredient. And the storytelling will revolve around that ingredient which was selected, and our relationship to that ingredient, its history, the human relationship to that ingredient, and what through time, what it's meant for different civilizations, actually.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's really wonderful. It's a storytelling about an ingredient. It's a history of a spice. That's really,
Yes, and that ingredient is featured and reinvented in all 5 of the moments or tastings. So you will experience that ingredient in many different forms and contexts. So it's that's the storytelling element about it, and I'm glad I came back to this, because it is, fundamental, certainly, to the experience, that it is this kind of beginning, middle, end. There is a story to this, and how does it shape us, and how can we think about this with the human experience and our own story and our own relationship to Mother Earth, and all of these living, breathing things that are existing around us.
I completely understand. I mean, when you mentioned that great things come from really difficult experiences, especially when it comes to injury and when it comes to our health, I have a similar experience. That is when you start appreciating things that perhaps I wouldn't want to say took for granted, because we never really take everything for granted, but that you maybe not have noticed as much as some other things, because we are made to rush ahead a lot in the culture that we live in now, which is now a global culture, really, a very rushing culture that always goes at least 10 paces ahead. And our bodies are not really made for that kind of speed, the way that our minds are made. And I think that a lot of disparity between what our bodies can do and what our minds can do in that space in between lies a great deal of misfortune, because we don't understand that sometimes we're unable to really get to a place as fast as our mind can. And I think that's the beauty of our existence, is that we can't do it because we are in a physical body, and there's a reason for it. And I think that going back to the body and understanding its own wisdom and its own memory and its own intelligence is a really important mission. And I think you're in a really important mission doing that. Go ahead.
Well, no, because you just got me thinking, because thank you for bringing up the body-mind connection. I just want to mention that actually it's something that is also built into our weekend experiences. We're not just exploring the senses and the mind, but we're also exploring the body. And with that, we are actually, for the first time, introducing in November Gaga dance. And this will serve as almost a prelude to a kiss, a prelude to the 5 senses experience. But Gaga dance is a free-form, rhythmic dance language movement that started actually in Israel. I just got exposed to it recently. The teacher, facilitator of it is incredibly tapped into using the senses as a way to think about the body and to get us to really to go into our mind, to use our imagination and bring that into the openness of the body, and to kind of like bridge this body mind connection with by thinking less and giving us metaphors to think about, to inspire that body connection.
Yeah, it's amazing. Absolutely. Tapping into the intelligence of the body is, I think, a saving grace, especially for our times. And the body has great intelligence, and we don't listen to it as often as we should, or maybe at all. Yes. And I think that that is a really a great deal of the re-education of it, even for people that are, for their work connected to their bodies, for dancers and for people like that, even for them, it's because they look at their bodies as their instruments for art. There is a neglect very often for the element of intelligence and nourishment, because it's an economic thing. Once our bodies become also not going too much into Marx now, but why not a little bit? The moment we are the tools, and our bodies become tools in whatever form, and becomes a means of production, that's the moment that we lose elements that are also important within what our bodies can give us, and sometimes forget them. So I think that what you're doing now, and how all of that that you've went through, and how you went through your life, and what led you to a great place.
It's recreating that bond. So in the same way that we're going back to childhood in many ways through some of these experiences, we're also bringing back this body connection, and we're hoping that somewhere along the way in that weekend, it's going to hit everyone differently, but there will definitely be something that each guest connects to at a deeper level. That through the course of this weekend, there's going to be something that really connects.
Can you tell us the dates and how people can reach you, and also how people can get to see a little bit about what you do in terms of filmmaking as well? Because there's the two things we talked about, so I don't want to kind of leave the element of filmmaking out, because I think what you are doing now and what you did quite extraordinary and really interesting. So both things, please.
Yeah, with pleasure. So our final two liminal weekend experiences of the year are November 12th to the 14th. That's Friday to Sunday. And November 26th to the 28th, also Friday to Sunday. It's the second and fourth weekend in November at the incredible Quinta de Sant'Ana in Mafra, just 25 minutes north of Lisbon. Instagram, you can find us at Liminal Sessions, just one word, Liminal Sessions with an S, as well as Facebook. And for more information, feel free to contact me directly through mobile, through WhatsApp, also in email, info at liminalsessions.com, and then I can send more information. But we do post a lot of our media and Instagram. That would be central place. And as for my filmmaking, eyespotfilms.com is my main website. It's spelled EYESPOTFILMS.com. And I'm currently developing the film inspired by my father's story. A White Horse for Batavia is the working title. And I'm also just finishing up two short films that got made in 2019 are still actually on the festival circuit. One shot in Bosnia, the other in Mongolia.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So what are their titles?
Yep. The one in Bosnia is called Boundaries. And it's about a local boy meeting a refugee boy over a lost kite in kind of the corridor of where Europe meets Schengen. And the film in Mongolia is called Murin Kur, translated as The Horsehead Fiddle, which deals with climate change, but between two nomadic friends, who's one of them whose horse actually eats plastic and gets sick and leads their lives to diverge. And so that was made at the end of 2019 and just got shown in Brussels Film Festival. So it's amazing as well to have things like film festivals be live again to the public. And,
oh God, yeah, for sure.
Enjoy the arts. Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation, because I'm a film person as well, and the idea of cinemas not being available was really difficult. It's such an important thing. Audiences and live events and people watching things together, and community that it develops, and also the communal experience of watching a film is extremely, extremely important to the art, to the medium. So but that's maybe another show, another time. For now, I absolutely urge people to have a look at your liminal sessions and your sensory experiences, and to.
No, I just wanted to add that food in the five senses. A Liminal Weekend Experience is our premiere event, but in early 2022, we will be launching the Liminal Bicycle Experience, which will be 3 days of cycling in the Alentejo.
I saw that. You didn't mention it. I thought that. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me of it. I wanted to ask you because that was really cool. Yeah, please tell us a little bit about it.
It's much more than a regular bicycle experience, but we've chosen a part of Portugal closer to Spain, where you have rolling hills dotted by cork and olive trees and very, very few cars, to the point where you can bicycle for hours and not find any cars. So it's great bicycle terrain, and you're literally immersed in nature, and storytelling is a part of it. And we're going to be exploring all the senses there. 3 days. It's very intermediate to even beginner level. And we're focusing as well on the history and the culture and food and wine in the Alentejo of Portugal. So that will be a 3-day, 3-night experience launching in probably March 2022. We also have, the last thing is we're developing a permaculture food lab, which will involve a recipe and a workshop, starting with a permaculture at a permaculture farm, and explained through the perspective of really self-reliance and creating one's own permaculture, and looking at food and picking food and herbs, and actually on site. So that will also be just connecting us even deeper to, and that will be a day experience, connecting us even closer to food. And last but not least is an art science project that we're looking to develop, and bringing artists and scientists together to come up with solutions for existential challenges we face today.
Is that something that is going to be, I guess, for 2022?
Yes. We're just working out. We're working out a venue, because we have great Gulbenkian Museum and the Museum of Natural History in Lisbon have both expressed interest. Yeah.
Very in tune again. I think I'm going to saying it for the 5th time now. Very in tune with the times, but it's really true. And I forgot one thing that really brings everything together, and that is you're an educator, and everything that you're doing really is storytelling, and it is liminal. But in fact, it's very educational. So that part of your story held, a great importance in what you do now.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think definitely with any story, one would hope that you're learning, and there is some factual, really interesting, but educate from an education standpoint. Yeah. And I think we're picking up. We're picking up stuff along the way. We're collecting, and we have to decide, what is important, what is fact. All these questions are also interesting, today. What is real? So
a lot of people are very interested in learning new things now. I think that because of the change that came with the change in the last couple of years, that the understanding, perception of a great deal of people that maybe wouldn't have come to the point of kind of reassessing things, are now reassessing some, from careers to just general life viewpoints. I think the educational road is really the right road. Everything else kind of fits into that really nicely. Plus, it's fun, and it's an enjoyment, and they will get a lot out of it. But also the new things they will get out, the new knowledge. I think I want to thank you really for this conversation. It was lovely. I hope you enjoyed it too. I'm sure that our listeners will enjoy it. And to say goodbye and good luck with everything that you're doing, and to keep in touch.
Well, what a pleasure.
It.
It was really nice to talk with you and just share ideas. Yeah, and really to also process, what we're doing and share it and collaborate as well. I just wanted to put that out there, that we're always looking at different people that either want to be direct collaborators with us, artists, musicians, chefs, but also just from a level of discussing ideas, concepts, and maybe helping one another out in whatever we might be doing. So it was really enjoyable to.
That's true. That's it's co-creation in every kind of way, with nature and with others, and that's nothing more beautiful than that. Thank you so much, Joshua. It was a great chat, and all the best. Godspeed.
Fala lipa.